In today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I got asked about by one of you awesome people in the community tab when I asked for suggestions for videos, and that's on kind of keeping things clean when you're practicing and playing the guitar, dealing with muting, because that's the thing about this instrument is it's really easy to get some extra noise happening. A lot of times when my students are learning scales, I get to listen to their low strings kind of ring out haphazardly while they're playing through, and it's something that you definitely learn over time and you get better and better at doing, but it's something that I figured I could shed some light on in terms of both what I do with my left hand and with my right hand to help kind of minimize some of that noise. So if you're into cleaning up your guitar playing, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is kind of being not necessarily creative, but using your left hand to your advantage, because your left hand gives you lots of opportunities for blocking out extra string noise, and it can really help you get rid of a lot of unnecessary buzz. So the particular thing, if I'm playing, say, single notes, when I play scales, and I'll try to get this to a place where you can kind of see it. I don't know how well it'll be coming across. Let me adjust my lighting here. But going through, when I'm playing these single notes, so say I'm playing this G major scale, again, I don't know, I have to lean so that you can kind of see, but what I'm doing is when I'm playing, I have my finger in this kind of arched shape, and one thing that I'm doing is I'm almost positioning it, so like you see I'm pressing down the second fret of my D string, but I'm just resting kind of the pad of my finger against the G string so that it won't make any extra sound. And that's something that can help you particularly when you're climbing scales. And I do the same thing when I'm going down. So it's this subtle kind of positioning of your hand where even if I get too excited in my right hand and strum across, you don't actually hear the next string. And that's something that, again, like a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this video, including this kind of technique of resting your finger and coming in on that kind of sloped angle, is it takes time to develop it, so I don't want you to waste all of your practice time thinking about how you're holding your fingers, but these are things that you can think about when you're, say you're practicing a scale slowly. Just think, okay, am I getting any of this kind of extra noise happening? And just see, this is something that improves over time. It's not something that I would necessarily deliberately practice for hours a day trying to place your fingers. It's something that you can just be aware of and think about, and it'll kind of start to come a little bit more naturally. The next thing I'm going to talk about with left hand is something I get quite a few students who come to me because I, of course, make my living as a jazz guitarist, and that is the genre of music that is nearest and dearest to my heart, and it also is a genre where we have to play a bunch of crazy chords and stuff like drop threes in particular. I get a lot of questions about because they have, so this I'm playing a G major 7 chord, and I'm playing the 3rd fret of the E string, 4th fret of the D and G strings, and then the 3rd fret of the B string. And sometimes my students wonder, they're like, well, how do you not hit this A? And particularly on that chord, the A kind of, it makes it sound muddy as hell, but it kind of works, whereas if I was an A flat major, that's really not a note that we want in there. And so again, what I'm doing is I'm slanting my finger, so when I pick that A string, it can't make any sound. And I'm doing the same thing up here with my E string. I'm resting my pointer finger there against the string. And so that's something that I always encourage my students to look for solutions to when they're playing chords that they maybe aren't familiar with. Like, say, for example, this is a D minor 7, and it's a drop 2 chord, which is, I have my 5th fret of the A string, 7th fret of the D string. I'm barring to the 7th fret with my pointer finger, and then my middle finger's on that 6th fret of the B string. And then I'm just resting my pointer finger so that the E string, I can't hit it. And then on this end, I'm actually, I don't know how well this comes across on camera, but I'm just resting my pointer finger against that low E, so it can't ring out either. I'm not getting any notes that I don't want. And so by using this part of your finger to mute the high strings and sometimes the tip of your finger on the low ones, so like if I do a C chord, I'm actually pressing not with like a lot of force, but I'm positioning my ring finger so that it's touching that E, so that no note's coming out. And those are kind of the two main mechanics for left hand muting. Yeah, that's kind of the main bit there. And then with my right hand, this is kind of a tricky one because right hand technique is one thing that as a guitar player and a guitar teacher, I don't think there's one way to do. Like for example, if any of you are familiar with the guitarist Pat Metheny, he holds his pick in the most monstrous, like it's a monstrosity how he holds his pick. He does like 3 fingers and he has this kind of funny like jerky motion, but he plays fast as hell and amazing stuff. So God bless him. I very firmly believe that everybody has a different kind of physiology and a different way of dealing with it. But I'm going to share with you kind of what works for me when I'm using my right hand, and it's something that if you aren't super locked into any technique or you're looking to kind of change your right hand technique, it's something that you can work on and try to incorporate into your playing as well. These are just things that have worked for me, and you can take the principles of them and find a way to make it work for however you like to hold your pick and however you like to pick on the guitar. But basically, if you want, you can go down the YouTube rabbit hole of right-hand picking techniques. There's guys like Troy Grady who have gotten so nerdy and analytical about this. It's quite fascinating. But the basic kind of premise of my picking technique is I try to keep my hand floating. I don't really like to anchor very aggressively, either down here or with my wrist on the bridge. And I try to keep my hand almost so that the pick's at a 90-degree angle, and I do that just so with little bits of slanting, I can either adjust to going slanting down a little bit when it's optimal, and leaning back almost, slanting up when it's optimal. But the main kind of idea here that I'd like to impress upon you is, first of all, this kind of applies to everyone, particularly guitarists. We like to hit really hard sometimes, and that comes with chaotic strumming motions where you might hit some extra strings that you don't mean to. So that's something that when I'm working on my picking, I take quite a bit of deliberate care to do, is I want to keep my picks as close, try to turn so it's maybe visible. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep my pick as close to the string as possible. I don't want to be picking way out. Like a lot of players who come to me who have been self-taught for a while have this really dramatic kind of like motion where we're kind of swinging for the fences, and that really makes it hard to kind of tighten things up because you're gonna, the more you move, the greater the likelihood is you're gonna hit an extra string. So that's something I would think about a lot, is kind of controlling the range of motion up and down that you do with your pick. Because that's a huge point for hitting extra strings. And then the other thing that I find, because I don't anchor low and I don't anchor at the bridge, and I'm sure there's a way to achieve this effect while doing both of those techniques, I just don't do them, so I can't really tell you how you would do that. But one thing I tend to do is if I'm playing, say, like a scale, like let's say I'm playing G major, I'm actually resting a little bit of like this part of my hand. And when I do it, it also kind of comes up to this part of my hand as well, I'm just noticing. But I'm using my palm to just graze. And again, this is why I don't say I'm an anchored player, because I'm not pressing on them, but I'm just kind of letting my hand just lightly touch those low strings so that it isn't like... And actually, even then, so clean picking technique, just in not hitting extra strings, will definitely help you out a lot with this, because I didn't get the desired effect. But let's say I can't do it. But if there was like a common problem is as you go up the scale, you know, you might get some ringing out. And this is a way to kind of mitigate that, is by keeping your hand. So I'm just making a tiny little bit of contact on those bottom strings so that I'm not getting any of that extra buzzing. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me today. If you have any tips on things that are related to this, please leave them in the comments so other people can learn from them. And I'd love to hear from you, especially if you're an anchored player, kind of how you deal with that, muting the low strings while you go up. Again, accuracy with the pick is one of the biggest things you can do, and controlling that motion. But for anything that slips through the cracks of that, resting my hand really helps. And again, I'm resting, like I'm barely touching the strings. I'm not pressing into them or anchoring on them. But that's pretty much it for me today. Hope you found this useful. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I have a contact page linked down in my website there if you'd like to take a guitar lesson with me. And sorry, down in the description is what I meant to say. If you want to take a lesson with me, I've been working with a bunch of you guys from YouTube, and it's been a real treat to connect with people kind of all over the world. I take on all levels and all genres of students, and I'd absolutely love to work with you on whatever's troubling you on the guitar. And last but not least, I got new videos coming out every Monday and every Thursday. I'd love to see you in the next one. And until I do, I wish you a wonderful day, and I hope you have some fun playing the guitar.